She sat in seat 1A, quiet, respectful, and fully paid. Yet they still treated her like a threat. Flight attendant Marla Connors saw 17-year-old Lila James, and instead of offering service, she delivered suspicion. Lila wasn't loud, she wasn't defiant, but she was black, poised, and unafraid, and that was enough to make her a target. Marla pushed, prodded, and escalated until Lila and her grandmother were marched off the plane like criminals. But when they picked Lila, they didn't know who they were messing with. They didn't know her grandmother, Elise James, wasn't just a passenger. She was the CEO of a $2 billion zero-cent aerospace firm, and that airline had just canceled the most expensive deal of its life. What came next wasn't just justice. It was exposure. It was a reckoning. Before we go any further, comment where in the world you're watching from and make sure to subscribe, because the story you're about to hear isn't just about one girl. It's about all of us. Sunlight spilled across the tarmac as the jet pulled away, leaving behind two women in silence. But inside that silence, something had already begun to shift. The balance of power. Her name was Lila James, 17, bright-roomed and traveling alone for the first time. She had earned it. The acceptance letter from Columbia had arrived 2 weeks earlier, and her grandmother, proud and quiet, insisted she fly first class. "You deserve to sit up front," she'd said, folding the boarding pass like it was sacred. And so, on a warm June afternoon, Lila boarded Flight 282, bound for New York, earbuds in, ticket in hand, peace resting softly on her shoulders. She was dressed neatly, button-down shirt, dark jeans, polished sneakers. Nothing flashy, nothing loud, just enough to say, "I belong." The gate agent barely glanced up as she passed, and Lila moved down the jet bridge with a silent excitement pulsing in her chest. Her seat 1A was waiting, gleaming with leather and sunlight. She stowed her bag, settled in, and closed her eyes. But peace has a fragile heartbeat. Before the cabin even filled, a tall, stern-faced flight attendant approached. Her name tag read Marla, her posture stiff with authority. She didn't greet Lila, didn't smile. She simply hovered, like someone waiting to catch a mistake. Then came the tap on the shoulder. 2 sharp raps. Lila startled, pulling back one earbud. "Yes, ma'am?" "You'll need to turn those off," Marla said, her voice low but edged. "We don't allow active devices before takeoff." "They're not on," Lila replied, calmly. "They're just noise canceling." Marla stared for a beat too long. "They still emit signal. I'm going to need them removed." There were no instructions posted, no announcement made, and yet Lila folded them neatly and placed them in her lap. No protest, no scene. A few rows back, a boy, white, maybe 18, bobbed his head to the beat of his music. No one said a word to him. Lila noticed. And so did the man in the gray suit across the aisle. His newspaper lowered an inch. His eyes narrowed. Have you ever witnessed something unfair and told yourself it wasn't your place to speak? Lila didn't speak either, but her fingers tightened slightly. Her jaw set. And somewhere, deep down, something shifted. Sometimes the storm doesn't start with thunder. Sometimes it begins in silence. The plane filled quickly. Business travelers, families, a few quiet couples lost in their routines. But Lila sat still, hands folded over her headphones, eyes on the clouds just beginning to blush pink outside the window. She was used to being unnoticed, used to being the quiet one, but now she could feel it. Eyes watching, not with curiosity, but with scrutiny. Marla passed by again. Her heels clipped against the floor like punctuation marks. She adjusted overhead bins, checked seat belts. Yet her gaze kept flicking back toward 1A. Lila didn't flinch. She just sat a little straighter, her breath measured. Then, without preamble, Marla returned. I need to verify your ticket, she said. Lila blinked. Of course. She handed it over. Seat 1A, first class, paid in full. Marla stared at the paper longer than necessary, eyes narrowed, lips pursed. Just making sure, she muttered. You seemed a little out of place earlier. The words hung there, too heavy for the air to carry. Across the aisle, the man in the gray suit lowered his paper another inch. This time, he didn't look away. Lila took her ticket back. Her fingers trembled, but her face remained calm. How many times had she felt this before? Being questioned without cause, being measured without permission. The cabin settled into takeoff mode. Engines roared, altitude rose, but tension didn't leave with the ground. Marla returned once more, this time holding a laminated card, the kind flight crews use when they want to sound official. Wireless headphones are prohibited during certain flight phases, she announced flatly. Lila tilted her head. I understand, but is everyone being asked the same? Marlin said nothing, just held out her hand. Lila hesitated, but only for a second. She gave them over without a word. What would you have done in that moment? The cabin grew quiet, not peaceful, silent, heavy, watching, and Lila sat there, alone in 1A, not defiant, not dramatic, just quietly aware that something wasn't right, not about the rule, but about why the rule had found her, and her alone. 20 minutes into the flight, Lila kept her gaze on the clouds. Her headphones were gone, her seat was quiet, but the unease hadn't faded. It had deepened, sinking into her skin like cold air through cotton. She wasn't upset, not yet. She was calculating, Marla moved with a new kind of certainty now, as if Lila's quiet had given her license. She spoke in low tones to another attendant, nodded once, and disappeared behind the curtain toward the galley. Moments later, the head purser arrived, a tall man with silver hair and clipped speech. He didn't smile. Miss James, he began, we've received a report of non-compliance regarding your electronic devices. For safety, we require acknowledgement of crew instructions. Do you understand the consequences of failing to follow protocol? Lila looked up slowly. Sir, she said, her voice steady. I complied. I gave the headphones. I followed every instruction. He blinked, clearly unprepared for such calm. He glanced at the tablet in his hands. This isn't about debate. The crew felt threatened. Her heart pounded. Threatened? She was a teenager in a window seat, barely speaking. Are you accusing me of disrespect? She asked softly. He didn't answer. And that's when a voice rose. Clear, low, unmistakably firm, from the second row. That's a lie. Heads turned. Marla froze mid-step. The voice belonged to a woman in seat 2B, Lila's grandmother, Elise James. She stood slowly, not with anger, but authority. Watched from the moment we boarded. My granddaughter hasn't said a word out of line. She's been treated like a threat for nothing more than being young, quiet, and black. The silence that followed was colder than the jet stream. Have you ever felt a moment shift when truth enters a room and everything stops? The purser's face tightened. Ma'am, this doesn't concern. Oh, but it does, Elise cut in, her voice like smooth stone. I paid for these seats. I chose this airline, and I see exactly what's happening. No yelling, no chaos. Just clarity that couldn't be ignored. The decision came fast, colder than policy, and just as merciless. We'll need you both to deplane, the purser announced flatly. Security will meet you at the jet bridge. Lila didn't move, not at first. Her jaw clenched, her palms tight against her knees. This wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a message. You don't belong. Elise placed a hand on her granddaughter's shoulder. Stand up, baby, she whispered, with your chin high. Let them see who they're sending away. And so Lila rose, calm, dignified. not defeated. Passengers shifted in their seats, eyes flicking toward the aisle. Some looked away quickly, pretending not to see. A few murmured to each other, but no one stood. No one questioned the choice. How many times in your life have you watched something wrong happen and said nothing? Lila and Elise walked the aisle slowly, past men with loosened ties and women swirling their wine. The cabin was silent, thick with discomfort, the kind that only appears when justice is absent. At the jet bridge, 2 uniformed security agents greeted them, not aggressive, not apologetic, just official. They took down names, explained rebooking procedures. Elise answered every question with grace. Then, without a word, she pulled a slim black phone from her handbag. Not her personal phone, the other one. She dialed. The line connected immediately. "Cancel everything," she said. The voice on the other end responded only with, "Understood." That was it. No explanation, no anger, just a command with weight no one else could hear. But what was truly astonishing? Elise James wasn't just a grandmother. She was CEO of Vanguard Aerospace, a global aerospace firm, in final talks to provide $2,100,000,000, 0 cents, in aircraft systems, to the very airline that had just ejected her and her granddaughter. And now, the deal was off, quietly, permanently. Sometimes power doesn't arrive with noise. Sometimes it arrives in heels, a blazer, and a single phone call. The footage spread before the plane even landed. Shaky cell phone clips, no context, no sound, just a young black girl, calm and composed, being escorted off a plane. No struggle, no scene, just silence and optics. Hashtags bloomed like wildfire. Passenger removed. Headphone gate. Flying while black. People guessed. People filled in blanks. Some assumed Lila had caused a disturbance. Others claimed she had snuck into first class. But none of them knew the truth. Not yet. By the time Lila and Elise sat quietly in the airport lounge, far from the gate and far from the noise, the world had begun to turn. Elise's phone buzzed. She didn't answer. She didn't need to. In boardrooms 3 states away, screens lit up red. Emails flew. Phone lines blinked. At the airline's headquarters, one senior analyst traced the cancellation of the multi-billion-dollar contract back to one name: Elise James. Not just a passenger, a power broker, a builder of aerospace systems trusted by governments and tech giants alike. That was the moment they realized they hadn't just removed a grandmother and a granddaughter. They had removed leverage. Have you ever seen someone underestimated, only to discover they held the keys to the very room they'd been pushed out of? Meanwhile, Lila remained quiet. No interviews, no statements, just her silence, sharp as glass, cutting through the corporate spin. But others began to speak. A former flight attendant came forward anonymously to share a pattern: same airline, same treatment, same silence. Women of color repeatedly flagged for compliance issues no one could define. Reporters dug deeper. Policies were vague. Internal codes like NPP, non-priority passenger, appeared in confidential documents, a loophole that allowed selective enforcement without ever naming race. The truth had always been there, just buried. Now it was undeniable. And it had a face. Lila James, seat 1A. Unmoved, unbroken. They called it a scandal. The press ran headlines. Stockholders panicked. Executives scrambled. But Lila and Elise didn't speak. Not once. Not even when major networks lined up with microphones. They understood something the world was just beginning to learn. Silence, when chosen, can be more powerful than any speech. Inside Vanguard Aerospace, Elise met with her legal team. No lawsuits. No press strategy. Just one goal: accountability by consequence. Every contract under negotiation with the airline was pulled, every agreement reviewed, and Elise made sure one fact was understood across every boardroom she entered. This isn't about revenge. It's about respect. And we no longer give ours for free. Meanwhile, Lila was working too, not on interviews, but on code. A digital tool. A real-time passenger rights platform powered by AI, able to flag discrimination patterns as they happened, on any flight, by any airline. Quiet work, meticulous, purposeful. Have you ever been so hurt that you decided to build something no one could take from you again? One night, as rain tapped softly against the window, Lila handed her grandmother a small folder. Inside was a grant, funded in her name, for underrepresented teens pursuing aerospace and ethics. Elise smiled without showing her teeth. Weeks later, Lila walked into a community flight training center in Atlanta. No camera crews, no audience. Just a single woman at the back of the room, adjusting wires on an old simulator. It was Marla. No name tag, no badge of authority. Just a humbled figure, doing quiet work in the background. Lila didn't speak. She simply handed over the grant papers. Marla's hands trembled as she took them. Lila paused, then said softly, "Understanding isn't forgiveness, but it is a beginning." Then she walked out. That moment didn't trend. It didn't break the internet. But sometimes, what matters most isn't what the world watches. It's what grows after the world has turned away. Life doesn't always raise its voice when something goes wrong. Sometimes injustice comes quietly, in a gesture, a glance, or a rule applied to one person but not another. What happened to Lila and her grandmother reminds us that dignity is not given, it is claimed, one calm, steady breath at a time. Elise didn't fight with anger. She chose a quieter power, clarity, control, and consequence. And Lila, she didn't raise her voice, she raised awareness. As we grow older, we've seen moments like these, some close to home, some too far to reach, but each one carries a reminder. It's never too late to stand up, even if we do it sitting down. We don't always need a crowd to make a difference. Sometimes, all it takes is a choice to do the right thing, kindly but firmly. So ask yourself, in a world full of noise, what kind of silence are you choosing? Let it be the kind that speaks for others, the kind that builds, the kind that leaves behind a legacy not of noise, but of quiet, unwavering truth. Lila sat beneath a window that afternoon, sunlight resting softly on her shoulder, hands folded around a warm cup of tea. No cameras, no applause, just breath, stillness, and the quiet strength of knowing she had survived something meant to diminish her, and chose instead to rise with grace. Nearby, Elise adjusted a folder of new partnership agreements. Nothing dramatic, just the steady work of rebuilding a world that had tried to exclude them. What followed was not revenge, but reconstruction. A new system was being written. By Lila's code, by Elise's leadership, by the thousands who saw themselves in that moment of injustice, and perhaps more importantly, by those who chose to listen. If this story stayed with you, share it, subscribe to Echoes of Racism so these voices don't fade into silence. Some stories don't end with a bang. They end with a choice. To remember, to build, to be better. In the meantime, I've chosen 2 stories I think will move you just as much. Take care, and we'll see you soon.